The Young and the Restless spoilers. For a show built on decades of dramatic twists, long-lost children, surprise returns, fake deaths, evil twins, and generational family warfare, The Young and the Restless has managed to pull off something even more unbelievable this year. The complete disappearance of Christian Newman during not one but two fully staged Thanksgiving episodes. And this was not the kind of disappearance that ties into a future kidnapping plot or a last-minute twist designed to pull the audience into sweeps week. No, this was a far stranger phenomenon, the kind that exists in the eerie twilight zone where soap opera children often vanish when they become inconvenient. While the Newmans and Abbotts were busy passing around turkey, pie, emotional speeches, forgiveness arcs, and carefully choreographed camera close-ups, one member of the family, a child who should matter, had been erased from the holiday entirely. Fans noticed, and the silence was deafening. It raises a question the show has spent years avoiding but can't anymore. Where in the world is Christian Newman? What makes this disappearance so baffling is not only the fact that Christian is a Newman child, arguably one of the most important, considering his origins, but also the fact that literally every other Newman offspring received a reference, a cameo, or at the very least, an explanation. While Victor delivered a redemption sermon to Nate, while Claire Newman divided her time between two Thanksgiving celebrations like a star guest at overlapping weddings, while Harrison Locke pleaded for Claire to stay for dessert, while Connor Newman was name-dropped during a casual mention of ice skating with friends, Christian was nowhere. Not upstairs. Not at a friend's house. Not with a babysitter. Not even mentioned in passing. It was as though he had been swallowed by the plot hole from which soap opera children never return unless the writers need a custody war storyline. It becomes even more astonishing when one considers the logistics. Nick Newman boarded a jet and flew to Los Angeles in a frantic mission to rescue Noah alongside Sharon, all because Matt Clark resurfaced with a sinister agenda. And yet, during all the chaos, urgency, fear, and adrenaline, Nick never once said, "I need to check on Christian before I leave." There was no Christians with Sharon. No Christians with Faith. No Christians spending Thanksgiving with Adam. Not even a throwaway, "He's at a sleepover." Fans have been left to imagine that perhaps Nick dropped the boy off at an airport vending machine, left him with a security guard at Crimson Lights, or assumed he was mature enough to babysit himself while his father confronted a sociopath in another state. The irony becomes even sharper when you consider that Adam, the child's biological father, spent the entire holiday eating turkey with the Newmans, reflecting on family, redemption, Connor, and the meaning of Thanksgiving. How is it possible that Adam spent Thanksgiving contemplating life, legacy, and fatherhood, without sparing a single second to wonder where his other child actually was? That silence spoke louder than any scene the writers could have filmed. Adam can agonize over Connor's every emotion, but when it comes to Christian, the holiday spirit apparently shut down his paternal GPS. And then there is Victor Newman. The patriarch, the man who tracks every move his children and grandchildren make, the man who considers even a missing pen a personal affront to the empire he built. Victor managed to preside over not one but two holiday gatherings, deliver moral guidance to Nate Hastings, size up Claire's place in the family, observe Nikki's quiet struggles, glare meaningfully at Adam, and plot a cyber attack against Jabot. All without once acknowledging the existence of the grandson Nick and Adam nearly went to war over years ago. For someone who takes roll call at family dinners with military precision, how did Victor just skip Christian's name like he was a side character in an off-screen storyline? The show's silence becomes even more absurd when compared to the presence of the other younger characters. Harrison Locke had significant screen time, charming everyone with innocent questions and emotional sincerity. Connor was explicitly mentioned, giving audiences a sense of continuity. Even Claire, who until recently had tried to kill half the Newman family, received more emotional integration than a child whose paternity once fueled one of the biggest storylines in recent memory. For the writers to give Claire, a former villain, more holiday relevance than Christian is not just strange. It breaks the internal logic of the show. This is where fans begin to speculate, not because the show told them anything, but because the vacuum of information forces them to build theories to fill the void. Has Christian been quietly retconned out of existence until the writers need him again? Is he being saved for a Sora's reboot where he returns as a dramatic teenager who hates everyone? Is the show deliberately avoiding him to prevent reopening the Adam-Nick custody war? Or is the simplest explanation the correct one, that the show just forgot? It's not the first time Y&R has misplaced its children. Summer disappeared for months during her childhood. Faith bounced around unseen for years. Johnny, Katie, and other Abbott Newman kids have vanished into nanny limbo more times than viewers can count. But Christian's disappearance hits differently because he isn't just any child. He is the symbol of one of the show's darkest conflicts. Adam stealing a newborn, Nick raising him as his own, Sharon torn between two fathers, and Victor manipulating everyone involved. Christian's storyline was built on trauma, identity struggles, and emotional upheaval. To now pretend he doesn't exist, not even enough to mention him on a major family holiday, feels not just inconsistent but dismissive of years of narrative weight. If anything, it raises a broader issue. The show is pushing Claire, Harrison, Johnny, Connor, and even Kyle's emotional storyline front and center, while Christian drifts further into oblivion. It is impossible to overlook the pattern. When the show doesn't know what to do with a child, they simply disappear him until he becomes useful again. But Christian isn't a character who should be shelved. He's a Newman. He's a legacy. He's the child whose very existence once rewrote the map of Genoa City. The fans are not asking for a major storyline. They're not demanding a custody trial or a dramatic meltdown. They're asking for one basic thing: acknowledgement. A line. A sentence. A moment. Something as simple as, Christian is with the nanny for Thanksgiving. That's it. That's the bar. Soap operas have made entire storylines out of less. But failing to mention him at all? That's the kind of oversight that shakes the illusion of a living, breathing world where characters matter even when they're off-screen. Instead, Christian has become a ghost, present in DNA, present in history, absent in the narrative. And the longer the writers pretend he doesn't exist, the more fans will cling to the central question that should never have been ignored. Where is Christian Newman? Until the show decides to acknowledge him again, Christian exists only in the space between scenes, in the collective frustration of viewers who remember the child the script forgot, and in the hope that one day, when the writers need a dramatic teen twist or a custody explosion, Christian will be pulled out of narrative storage, dusted off, aged 10 years, and thrown back into the Newman family chaos where he actually belongs. But for now, he remains the holiday mystery of Genoa City, the child who vanished while everyone else got turkey. There are plot holes in soap operas, and then there are cosmic rips in narrative spacetime, the kind that leave fans wondering whether they're watching a drama series or an alternate universe where characters vanish like quantum particles whenever the writers don't feel like acknowledging them. And this week, The Young and the Restless delivered exactly that kind of storyline-breaking absurdity when Thanksgiving arrived. Turkeys were carved, pies were served, emotional arcs unfolded across two lavishly filmed holiday episodes, and absolutely nobody, not Victor, not Nick, not Adam, not Sharon, not Faith, not Chelsea, bothered to mention the existence of Christian Newman, a child who, by all reasonable measurement, should be central to any Newman holiday scene. This is no ordinary child. This is no background toddler. This is no random third cousin twice removed who only appears for birthdays. This is Christian, Adam's biological son, the baby he delivered with his own hands on the frozen ground of Chancellor Park, the child whose birth set off one of the most explosive custody battles in modern Y&R history. This is the little boy Sharon unknowingly raised as Sully, breastfeeding him, loving him, believing he was the child she lost, clinging to him as a symbol of healing after Dylan's service trauma. This is the child at the center of a storyline that once shattered marriages, incinerated friendships, broke Sharon's mental stability, rewrote Nick's paternal identity, and pushed Adam into one of the darkest periods of his life. And yet, this year, during the most family-centric holiday of the American calendar, Christian Newman was treated as though he had never existed at all. Let's start with the most glaring offender, Adam Newman himself. Adam sat in the Newman living room on Thanksgiving Day, discussing deep emotional topics, corporate strategy, Connor's ice skating trip, Nick's sudden absence, Claire's integration into the family, and even Victor's suspicious AI obsession. But never once paused to ask, wait, where's my other son? There he was, Adam Newman, the man who once torched his entire life fighting for custody of Christian, now casually sipping holiday wine like a man with only a single child. The writers had him wax poetic about Connor's anxiety, grief, and healing arc, but somehow never thought he might remember the existence of Christian, who is, and continues to be, one of the most important threads of his paternal storyline. The comedic irony here is almost painful. Adam once stood in court declaring he would burn Genoa City to the ground to reclaim his child. He went to war with Nick, emotionally gutted Sharon, and risked his own sanity to be recognized as Christian's father. But apparently, all it takes to erase such passion is one AI software conversation with Victor Newman. That's right. One technical meeting, one strategic whisper across the dining table, and suddenly Adam's brain can no longer access the file labeled Children, 2. Chelsea even asked Adam what he and Victor were discussing so intensely, and Adam brushed her off with vague evasiveness. Perhaps because he couldn't admit the truth, neither of them could remember where Christian actually was. If Adam forgetting his own son is bad, then Sharon forgetting him is biblical-level narrative insanity. Sharon did not just babysit Christian. She did not simply take him for a few months. She believed him to be her own newborn child, named him Sully after Dylan's fallen comrade, nursed him, protected him, and rebuilt her entire emotional sense of motherhood through him. His removal from her life was one of the most traumatic blows she has ever endured. And yet, when Sharon hopped on a plane to Los Angeles with Nick to search for Noah, she didn't mention the child she once mothered with the kind of spiritual devotion that rewrote her entire identity. Sharon was the woman who once woke up every night checking on Sully. Now, she jets off to another state and somehow forgets that Christian, the very same child, even exists. The Sharon who spent a year unraveling emotionally after losing him? The Sharon who begged for time with him? The Sharon who worked to maintain a bond post-reveal? This is no simple oversight, it is a narrative amputation of a major emotional limb. Meanwhile, Nick Newman, legal father of Christian, was too busy fighting for Noah's life, solving storage room crimes, and being manhandled by a sociopath in LA to remember he has a son at home. Even on the plane, between worrying about Matt Clark and comforting Sharon, Nick never once said, "I should call home and check on Christian." If Nick had a scene where he whispered, "He's with Faith," or "He's with a sitter," or "He's with the nanny," or literally any acknowledgement, fans would have accepted it. But no, not a single syllable, not a casual line of dialogue, not a lazy throwaway excuse. Nothing but a screenwriting void. Then there's Victor Newman, the patriarch who has always kept track of every child, grandchild, stray dog, and random stranger who ever set foot on his ranch. Victor gave a redemption speech to Nate, watched Nikki carefully for signs of weakness, monitored Adam's behavior, embraced Claire like she was being inducted into the dynasty, and kept his eye on corporate strategies. Yet even Victor didn't ask, "Where is Christian, Nicholas?" or "Has anyone checked on the boy?" The same Victor who once micromanaged Nick's custody decisions, forced Adam into impossible ultimatums, and treated Christian's placement like it was a global security issue now seems perfectly content to pretend the boy is off living in a parallel universe. And the writing only becomes stranger when compared to the other children who did receive attention. Harrison got a full emotional arc. Connor received thoughtful mentions. Katie and Johnny existed through subtle references. Faith was brought up. Even Claire, a woman who nearly murdered half the Newman family last year, received more holiday integration than Adam's biological son. It is almost comical that a newly introduced former villain granddaughter had more narrative weight than the literal product of a year-long storyline that once dominated the show. This brings us to the uncomfortable truth: the writers have quietly shoved Christian into the narrative closet. The place where soap opera children go when they're too inconvenient to handle. Y&R has done this before with Summer, Johnny, Reed, Charlie, Maddie, Faith, Moses, and countless others. But Christian is not a minor character. Christian is not optional. Christian is not the kind of child you forget on Thanksgiving like an apron you misplaced. Christian is a Newman. Christian is legacy. Christian is trauma. Christian is history. He cannot simply vanish without consequence. Yet here we are. A family celebrating Thanksgiving with no acknowledgement of a child who should be central to that table, and an audience forced to wonder whether the writers intentionally want fans to forget him until the day they saw us recast him as a 16-year-old with a grudge against everyone. Fans have already constructed dozens of theories. Maybe Christian is spending the holiday with the ghost of Sage Warner. Maybe he's living in the crawlspace under the Newman Ranch. Maybe he's taken over Dark Horse headquarters while nobody was looking. Maybe he's in the same dimension as Sheila Carter's off-screen victims. Or maybe, and this is the one possibility fans fear the most, the writers simply forgot. Because at this point, even a scene with a nanny saying, "Christian is upstairs napping," would be a cinematic blessing. So where does this leave viewers? Frustrated, amused, bewildered, and completely aware that the show cannot keep ignoring this gaping narrative hole forever. Christian's absence is too large, too obvious, too historically loaded to be hand-waved away indefinitely. If the show doesn't address him soon, even with the smallest acknowledgement, the disconnect between the character's memories and the audience's reality will only grow wider. The mystery of Christian Newman is not a plot. It is not a twist. It is not narrative tension. It is a writing oversight that has become so bizarre, so glaring, so illogical, that it now reads like unintentional satire. And until someone in Genoa City finally speaks his name again, Christian Newman remains the child lost not to kidnapping, not to tragedy, not to fate, but to the writer's room.